Hello everybody, my name is Will Page and I am the Research and Representation Manager at the Students' Guild from the University of Exeter. Here are my top 5 election tips. Tip number 1, manifesto for all students. Make sure that your manifesto is written and relevant to all of the students at the university. A lot of people will often write a manifesto which is, say, for example, a bunch of promises that is relevant to students who are involved with student media. That doesn't matter to students who are not involved with student media. You need to make sure that your points on your manifesto are relevant to international students, to undergraduates, to postgraduates, to UK students, to all the students across your campus. So consider that very carefully when you write your manifesto. Because if you write a manifesto that's only relevant to one group of students, they're the only students that will vote for you in the election. Point number 2. Making vague promises which is totally unspecific. The classic one that really annoys me is when candidates write a manifesto and they'll say, I will improve communication. How will you improve communication? That means absolutely nothing. You need to have specific ideas, okay? So for example, I will use a specific type of social media which the union isn't using at the moment to improve communication. That's an example of a specific promise. If you don't do that, people will see that your promises are vague and they won't vote for you. Point number 3. Have an hourly schedule for your election campaign. Now, obviously, I think the election here at Barford runs over about 3 or 4 days, and time is absolutely precious. So it's really important that every hour of time that you spend for your election is carefully planned, so you get the most out of it. So a good way of doing this, for example, is if you've got 5 people involved in your campaign, everybody has an hourly schedule for where they're going to be and what they're doing at every time. So if you're a candidate and you lose by 5 votes, and you spent 90 minutes of the campaigning time queuing to buy tea and coffee, that's not an effective use of your time. You need to make sure that somebody else is doing that for you. Okay. Point number 4, it's important that you have a script for your canvassers for what they're going to say. These people are going to be representing you, the student body. So, for example, one of the classic things that canvassers say that I think isn't very effective is they always ask people, have you voted yet? Now, within 3 hours of the elections, everyone is going to say, regardless of whether they voted or not, everyone's going to say that yes, they have. Because if they've already voted, there's no point talking to them. If they haven't already voted and they're lying to you, then they're not going to want to talk to you, you're not opening up a conversation. So try to make sure, think carefully about things your canvassers are going to say to people on your behalf. You might want to give them a script, you might want to say these specific things that you're going to say on my behalf when you approach people to get them to vote for me. 2 key points is make sure they mention your name, make sure they say a policy or an idea that's going to be relevant to the student that they're speaking to, and that's to keep their interest. Lastly, point number 5. If you do the same things as everybody else, you're not going to stand out. If you have posters that are the same as everybody else, flyers the same as everybody else, banners that are the same as everybody else, then you're not going to do very well. One example, one of the candidates in the election at Exeter 3 years ago, rather than having a normal banner, they made a banner that was half the size of a building which had their name written on it, and that was taken around campus all that week. So everybody saw it, it became a centrepiece of the canvas. So they didn't do the same thing as everybody else. You could argue that it was the same thing as everyone else because obviously they had a banner too. They just made it bigger so it stood out. So be very, very clever with what you do. Don't do the same thing as everybody else. Try it. How are you going to be different? How are you going to make yourself stand out with the things that you're doing? And those are my 5 campaign tips. And if you missed the session that I did here today, unlucky.